we have more questions, but I think the time also is important.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can come back another time.
How many questions do you have?
I have, for instance, in Surah 434, what is the best way to translate men are protectors, responsible? And the other translation said men are have more benefits that God gave them, so it's kind of confusing that interpretation of the
read all the questions.
ayat.
Okay, let's read them, and then I can answer one more, and then we can schedule another time. For the rest.
Yeah, I
Do you
think
want,
so.
like,
Because
what questions you have? And
okay, basically on that one, and the same ayat, it talks about beaten women, so it's the same ayat. One is, the first part is men are responsible of women, or men have over, what is the other translation you have seen? More
Yes.
privileges than,
and those are on the website.
yeah.
Okay, see, I have a chapter in the Conference of the Books.
Two chapters.
Two chapters where I talk about the beating verse.
Mhm.
I would really love for you guys to study these chapters. They're not long. But the short of it is not talking about a husband beating his wife. It is talking about a procedure for particular accusations, and the chapter goes, and so after you read it I can answer,
Okay.
but I want you guys to, the other thing is the men are, when it says قوامون قيامة, you can read it as guardians, protectors, caretakers, servants. The word قوامة can have a variety of meanings. But what is really important in this passage is بما أنفقوا, according to what they spent. And it's like Ibn Arabi says in his Tafsir al-Quran, he says, it is conditioning or clarifying that the issue is about who has the obligation, the primary obligation to spend, unless otherwise agreed upon. So if the presumption in a marriage, and bima anfaqu, which means that qawama has to do with the obligation to spend. It doesn't talk about authority, it doesn't talk about guardianship, it doesn't talk about who's the master, who's the not master. It is saying that men are the ones responsible for spending. Bima anfaqu. And bima faddal Allah means what God has given them. So it's as if saying men are the ones who usually have the money, and so they're the ones who have the obligation to spend. Now, I can vary this obligation, and this is quite, again, the influence of Muslim women jurists in Islamic legal interpretation, is that they say that if a husband, they have these long discussions about whether a husband can prevent his wife from earning money, and the answer is no. I mean, the unequivocal answer is that a woman has a right to earn her own money and to keep it. Now, but if the family has a need, if there is need in the family, then the agreement of infaq, of qiwama, can be varied accordingly. So if I and my wife agree that, okay, the presumption is you, the husband, have the financial responsibility, and then at some point we reach an agreement in the marriage that no, it's 50-50 or 40-60 or whatever it is, or that we just share the responsibility equally, the issue of qawama goes away. Because it is now the financial responsibility, and it was the reason for the occasion for revelation of this verse, which is, by the way, has nothing to do with the beating, so-called beating verse, because it's actually not a beating issue. Anyway, you reach after, but on this particular verse, but on the qawama issue, it's basically there was some tribes in Arabia. They had two different practices was Islam negated. One was that in marriage the wife's the family or the tribe of the wife would pay a dowry. And by the way, that practice still survives in some Arab tribes, where the wife pays a dowry to the man. Second, there were some tribes that if the wife was from a lowly family, and the husband was from an honorable, especially Meccan family, then the lowly family would pay what they called an honor price. They would pay money to the aristocratic family as part of the marriage agreement. And the Qawama verse came clearly negating these practices and said, no. Dowry paid by the female under the circumstances of Arabia, especially at the time, and the honor price is void. It negated it and voided it and said, presumptively the man has the obligation of financial responsibility because they're the ones that usually have the money. And then Muslim jurists after that, they made it very clear that, but that agreement could be varied if, as long as we're not talking a dowry by the wife or an honor price, if the need for the family and according to the wealth of each. So, again, I mean, one of the things that I very much irks me about Wahhabi Islam is that it took the Qawama verse, and even the way they translated the verse, they translated it as men are the guardians of women. Where? How? And they spread it all around the Muslim world. As if you would have come and told my mother, who was raised in a family of shuyukh, that her husband is her boss, she would have beaten you up. I mean, my mother wouldn't beat anyone, but she would have done so, she would have kicked you. I mean, it's an absurdity, because so we get rid of racism and we have sexism. Islam is the message of emancipation. Memorize that. Islam is the message of emancipation. And so it cannot enslave one to the other, whether at basis of race, class, or sex. And any situation that puts a human being as a slave to the other because of class, race, or sex is completely inconsistent with Islam. I mean, one of the books that I wish would be translated, one of the series, one of my teachers, Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, probably one of the most remarkable theologians of the modern age, he wrote 35 books. And if I tell you the single theme of his 35 books is to remind Muslims, and he was reacting to Wahhabi Islam, because it was spreading during this time, is exactly that. And if they're translated to English, I think they would be amazing, because it's consistently reminding people why Islam exploded upon the world scene and spread so fast. And in places like Indonesia and Malaysia, it produced a cultural and social revolution because the idea was extremely liberating for especially the dispossessed classes. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what if the guy makes so much less, and then the woman, the wife, is say like makes so much money. For example, if the husband is a cab driver or school teacher, elementary school teacher, and the wife is an anesthesiologist or successful lawyers that makes a whole bunch of abundance of money. Where's
A
the
lot of jurists tell you that that the wife doesn't have an obligation to spend on the husband, uh, um, and that if she does, then she has a right to consider it as a debt upon the husband. But I'm among those jurists who will tell you that that would be a bad marriage.
a debt?
No, it would be a bad marriage if the wife sees that her husband and children are, I mean, needy, and she's rich and the husband is poor, and doesn't help out. It's a bad marriage because if it affects her children, and and considering it a debt, again, it would be a bad marriage. So if someone comes and tells me, no, don't tell me about bad marriages, tell me about rights. In my view, if nothing is achieved through coercion, but I would strongly tell her wife that she owes an Islamic obligation to take her children if she's actually much richer than her husband. Whether she takes care of her husband is not my concern. I mean, maybe even if she doesn't like her husband, her children shouldn't suffer. And there is, I think, the classical traditional view of the man is the provider regardless of the circumstance. It's problematic. I mean, it is very empowering to have the idea that women don't so that men can, when the Quran came and said the issue of qama, it was because men were so financially in control that it wanted to make it clear that they have an obligation to provide for the family, and that they cannot shirk off that responsibility. But by the same logic, every situation we need to look at the equities, what's fair. And I think that's far more consistent with what the spirit of true Islam is than any mechanical, type of. So imagine if you are, your wife works and you're a student, and the wife says, no, I'm not going to spend the dime, go, you have to provide. Is that beautiful in God's eyes? Is that pleasing to God? No. So I don't like the type of legal logic that leads to exploitation and suffering. It's not consistent with the spirit of true Islam.
Great. Thank you. We translate when we receive the video.
Okay.
It will be a better translation.
Yeah, it actually it would be even if you end up transcribing this, because Muslims all over the United States need to hear that this is Islam. And Muslims everywhere, once they hear it, they say, "Oh yes, I've always known this." We actually know it. We all know it, but we forget it with all the propaganda that we get from Wahhabi Islam. We eventually we forget it. But once we hear it, we say, "Oh yeah, you're not saying anything new. I've actually known this from the very beginning." And you read the Quran, and that feeling that a lot of people, when they read the Quran for the first time, a lot of people that come to Islam and after reading the Quran say, "Oh, I feel so liberated. It's like I can breathe for the first time." And then they spend enough time around Wahhabi Islam, and that sense of breathing goes away, and they realize, "I can't breathe anymore." That's very sad.
We're so grateful to you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure, and thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the opening for us, and
And I whenever you want to arrange for another meeting, I will be very happy. I mean, you're actually doing me a favor because this is the way I get an ajr and I get closer to Allah, and so you're doing me a huge favor. You know,
You're doing us huge
I-
favors.
I'm just reminding you of what you already know. When you go back and you look at all of this, you'll say, "Oh, he didn't say anything new." Okay, Assalamu alaikum. It's so wonderful meeting all of you.